Oh, and today's the 18th anniversary of my favorite all-time television show, Arrested Development. Random facts I found out today. And, okay, so there's no quiz. What's due tomorrow? Any questions on the map? Want to just turn it in now? Okay, please get it in tomorrow. And we're kind of going through the big shifts in America. This is kind of a big deal, kind of. So kind of big deal. You got that kind of? We're kind of getting this. Where did the Industrial Revolution begin? Where? Townsend, yeah. It began in Townsend, and then, yes, it began in Britain, and fast-moving stream. There's lots of reasons why. It's certainly because it wasn't because the British were smarter or harder working. No, they just, certain things happen. You know, France had a surplus of workers, and so they didn't want machines to replace their workers. Look at my wrist. Where were you people? You will be punished.
There's 2 stalls that work in there.
The 2 stalls at work? I don't make the rules. Yeah, sorry about that. But you still be punished. Because you're learning how to be, I'll tell you about what you're learning to be. Yeah, you're going to learn. Is it Burt's Bees? Yeah. I'm showing off.
Good job.
Thank you. And, okay, so let's review them really quick. The Industrial Revolution, there were 10,000 miles built of what, even though they weren't very good? Roads. And 3,700 miles built of? Canals. And then for railroads, what was the big decade of building? Yeah, those 1850s changed everything. And what section of the country were most of the railroads built? And the thing about railroads, we'll talk more about this, but railroads really, literally go to every level of production. You think of everything you need to build a railroad. That would expand production to manufacturing, to science, to schools, to new business practices. I mean, railroads really changed the world. And, let's see, War of 1812. Oh, what said no more European interference in the Western Hemisphere? Yeah, the U.S. could not enforce that. What country ironically enforced that? Britain, at least at first. And then it would come about getting debts and that kind of thing like that. What was the only party for the era of good feeling? Republicans. And what was Henry Clay's idea of tariff, bank, internal improvements? The American system. They would debate this over and over and over again. And before the transportation and industrial revolution, people were basically what? Yeah, they had to be self-sufficient. Think how everything changed once you can go to the store. It just, everything changes. And now we're completely reliant upon somebody else for everything. And what can you make at home from scratch? I mean, literally, everything from home, everything. Is there anything? I mean, what can you make? Someone first suggested sticks, and I thought that was pretty good. What's that?
Cotton sauce. I mean, you have to buy the sugar. If you live in the South.
Yeah. Okay, if you had chickens, but
Well, you're
But you have to buy drugs.
medicine. You
You have to buy
shouldn't.
the gun.
What?
and then you have to make the gun and make the bullets.
Unless it was tests.
Yeah, first someone said cookies. I mean, no, you can't make. I mean, really, what? You see how? Yes, you can do a few things, but no, really, what can you make? Really, almost nothing from scratch. Almost, and even the things you can make from scratch, you're really not making fully from scratch. So, and it was like that before, but it's now even more extreme. And think about the supply bottlenecks for various reasons, and prices are going up now because we're so dependent on just a few things. Remember how it's cheaper for water? Between 80 and 90% of all goods we buy today are shipped on water. Today. And so if there's only a few harbors that can handle the really big ships, what happens? Supply bottlenecks, and that's what's happening right now. That and the fact that they horribly mistreat truckers, poor truckers. They're so mistreated. It's an awful job. They have to sit there and wait until they get a load. They just have to sit in their truck, and they're not paid. So they might be there for 2 or 3 days. They have to sit in their truck and wait. Because if they're not in their truck, they might miss out. And so, it's, God, that's a tough life. Yeah. Well, they have to get good insurance, but it costs them a lot. Because most truckers are independent contractors, they have to pay a lot. They have a lot of costs. That's a tough living. No, they pay more. No. Yeah, or they hope for the best and don't think about them not paying for it. Yeah. It's yeah.
And that used to be a trucker for a little bit of the same.
Yeah.
Literally, it had like if it was a good day, you had well, some days he had like a 2-hour break to sleep, and then the other 23 hours of the day he was trailing. The other, well,
Yeah, I
the
know.
rest of the day he was just trailing.
It's a pretty, yeah, it's a tough life. Yeah. And that's what's kind of, that's part of the bottleneck now. Let's get the entertainment. Did we get to this?
Sure, yeah.
Did we talk about Eli Whitney Muskets? Springfield? Who's been to Springfield? There's many Springfields. This is Springfield, Massachusetts. Eli Whitney going to make muskets. And he sold Thomas Jefferson, here's the biggie, that he had machines to make the individual parts. Do you see the advantage of a machine? If you make it by hand, every part's unique. So even if you make individual parts, the French had experimented with this, making individual parts by hand. They're still unique and they might not fit together. Machines, every part's relatively the same. And so if one part breaks, you just plug it in, or you just spew out parts and then put them together at the end of the process, which is manufacturing today. And we look at this, we have like pieces. So you look at this desk, think of all the individual little pieces on this. We just assume, we just take for granted, okay, you make the individual pieces and put it together. Don't we just take for granted if a bolt falls out, we just replace it, right? That was revolutionary thinking in 1800 because it just wasn't done. If you don't do anything, it just, you don't even think about it. And so, you don't do that. He said he could do it with machines and muskets. Thomas Jefferson was actually personally approving a buy for muskets for the very tiny little U.S. Army. Muskets all made by hand, so that's that could be something you could transfer to manufacturing. And Eli Whitney walked into his office with a barrel of parts for 10 different muskets and said, machines made each of these individual parts. And he dumped them on Jefferson's desk. Jefferson, who loved inventions and tinkering and machines, it's false to say he didn't like industry. He was scared of all the industry owned by 1 or 2 people. That's what his big issue was. Jefferson's like, oh my goodness, and jumped up and started putting the muskets together, taking it apart, grabbing new pieces, putting together, blew his mind. And Eli Whitney got that contract and would build the Springfield Arsenal because there's water power to turn the wheel, to turn the lathes, or the drills, or whatever it might be. By the way, Eli Whitney was lying through his teeth. He didn't have these machines. They had tinkered with them, he had heard about them, but he had them made by hand, and then they carefully filed them down and all that to make sure they would all fit together, and he lied to Jefferson. Lied, and it worked. But by setting the stage and showing how this could be profitable at a time just before the Embargo Act, the Non-Intercourse Act, Makin's Bill number 2, and then the War of 1812. Remember all of those? Right at that time for the Industrial Revolution. There weren't very many workers in the United States. There's a shortage of workers. There's a perfect test case. And what do you call then the machines that make the individual parts? What's that? Well, it's going to go into a factory, but that's the big warehouse where you put them all. From an Indian term, that literally means a warehouse for goods. It's from India. They're called machine tools. And this is the most important part of capital, machine tools. Capital is the means to get over this mountain valley and never see it again. What are you going to do, Scooby? Garfield is just toppling it. Sit up straight. So, capital is the means of production. That's the machines, the factory, the fuel, the land it's on. But the most important are these machines. Like this is a drill that would drill the rifle barrels. The lathe for the butt of the musket. And that's all these, by the way, these belts would be turned by water power. So this is at Harper's Ferry. You have a wheel in some kind of fast-moving stream, and that's why these first ones have to be built kind of in mountains where the streams are moving fast. Same reason why dams are built in mountains. Streams are moving fast. And, by the way, what's this belt made out of? It's leather. And you want to know what happened to all the bison? They would go to leather for belts. And they were all killed. Yeah. Also cow leather, but bison leather. But anyways, these machine tools are the most important thing. These are the most valuable. And you see it today, sometimes they'll try to glorify them by calling them robots or things like that. They're just machines that make the pieces. And the country that makes the best machine tools actually has the most valuable exports in the world. You know what country that is? Germany. Germany. China exports a lot, but they buy most of their machines from Germany. The U.S. used to. We have kind of sold much of our, why do you think we get everything from the sea? We have to import everything. We used to make things. But, and we're still living on the wealth we got from this era. And this would change everything. Because these are really expensive. They replace workers, but they don't, you have to pay them. They show up on time. They don't demand things like bathroom breaks and rights and more than 2 stalls being open. They don't have those demands. By the way, that's what humans need. And so, this leads to number 5, the factory system. All capital under one roof. So the British just borrowed this name for the big warehouses from India, and we're just used to it. So that's a textile factory. And you notice all the belts? By the way, think how dangerous it would be to work in that place. Belts going everywhere, the spindles are whirling. Sometimes you get clogged, you got your fingers in there. By the way, that's why people with small hands might have an advantage for the employer. They can stick their hand in there and untangle things. We're coming to something. This is an iron mill, ironworks, but the capital under one roof. And this is a big shift. Before the Industrial Revolution, production was done in people's homes. It's decentralized. Now, all the machines under one roof. What a huge shift. Before, people would work at home. Skilled craftsmen work at home. Now they had to go to some place. And by the way, therefore, if this place isn't hiring, what happens to the workers? They starve. It's a totally different world. And they could see the rumblings in Massachusetts as early as 1820. And even though it hadn't hit most of the country, it's coming. And it's like this steamroller that's going to change everything. They feel it coming. They know it's coming. And it's terrifying. Everything they thought they knew was going to change. And it's coming so fast. It's no coincidence. But the biggest period of religious revivals in American history will happen at this time. Wow, I'm about to change my belief system. I'm scared. So, where did it begin? Textiles in New England. So textile mills would fall to the floor. Oh, my mouse broke. So those windows don't seal very well. And sometimes ants get in. when it gets cold, the ants get out of the cold. It's endemic in all the basements. Ant, right there. You want to see the ant? Have you ever seen an ant? So, textiles. And these mills started in Britain. They came here, look at the water power, or I'm sorry, all these spindles turned by water. So basically, they just would connect the wheel to the rest of the factory and it would turn. Fast moving streams. So they're all going to be where there's low mountains, New England. Now, this were not invented in Britain. This were not invented in the US. These were invented in Britain. Britain did everything they could to keep this technology in Britain because it gives Britain a what? Yeah, big competitive advantage because they had a monopoly. But Samuel Slater was essentially you'd call a superintendent or a foreman of one of these factories. He memorized an entire cotton mill. What a memory, but don't forget, people back then had significantly better memories than people today. Significantly better. We're not even in the same realm. Technology just eats your memory away. I have significantly better memory than you. And not because I'm smarter, but because I had to know more than you. I couldn't look it up as easy. You're probably going to have better memory than people of the younger 1 or 2 generations. Yeah, you will, probably. Unless things radically change. I'm not smarter, but I have a better memory than you. So I've trained it. Now, I'm also getting older, so I forget most little things. But it's just a weird thing. Technology, see, each generation, they had to just memorize more. Hey, before the printing press, people had amazing memories. They would have terrified us. He memorized it, built that factory in Massachusetts. Just before the embargo. Just before the War of 1812. Perfect timing. There's no coincidence. You have these series of events happening that aren't related, but you have Eli Whitney getting that contract through deceit because he lied. That's fraud, by the way. Samuel Slater also breaking the law and bringing it over just at the right time. Now, Slater would build this. It's still there. It's now a National Historic Site. And water power would be key. Here, you drop it in. Usually they have a sluice to try to get the water moving faster. But turn this wheel, you connect here, connect this cam here, and that would operate the whole factory. Of course, your problem is you have to be built, you have limited space. If you're built on like a mountainside, how much room do you have for a factory? And what if it floods? What if there's a drought? What if it freezes? There are problems with water power. Here's another view of it, turning all these wheels. It's pretty remarkable. But of course, they're incredibly creative people. You guys to get a power supply that you wouldn't need water. I wonder what's coming at that exact time. So New England mills would be the first real textile mills. And the bigger the circle, the more workers it's employed. So how were textiles made before? People would do it by hand. Make the thread, have a hand loom, then it would go to a machine. And they could produce faster and cheaper, so everyone did it at home, go out of business. And so if you wanted to work, you had to go where the machines are. And that's really moving. Go that way. We'll see how they roll. So, Lowell would be one of the biggest right here. And today it's a national park. And so if you go there, it's like walking into 1845. It's got stores and shops and you get food from that era. They still run a couple of the water mills. It's really cool. Lowell's a fun place to go. As I've said many times, the Park Service does amazing things. And they would literally dub this factory system the Lowell system. And what it was is, okay, yes, you have all the production on one roof, but people were used to being on their own and being independent, especially men. Now, women had much greater economic rights than they're going to have, but still, women, it was different. Usually they would be part of an economic unit, like a family. Men were expected to be more independent. And men did not want to go to a factory because a factory, when they hook that wheel to the rest of the plant, they want everyone to be there ready to work. They don't want people showing up late. They don't want people leaving whenever they want to go to the bathroom or go eat or just say, you know, I'm not going to come in today. They want everyone coming in and they want everyone leaving at the same time. Oh, that's not even enough. They want everybody to eat together, go to the bathroom, come back to work, and so they're always keeping the production going. By the way, when do they connect that wheel to the rest of the factory? Sunup. So they can work till sundown. You don't want like oil lamps or things like that in a textile mill. Think of the fire. It's already enough danger. Well, electricity will change things, won't it? But everyone coming in, people are used to doing things on their own. If you did production in your home, you worked when you wanted to. Now you want them coming in and working when you tell them to work. You don't want them to take a break and say, you know, I'm going to relax. No, we have a limited amount of time. And if you invested in this big factory system, you want the people to work there. You don't want people to demand crazy things like freedom or rights. You want them working. Men are going to be really hard to convince to do this. We'll have to break them. Oh, they'll be broken. But that's why they would hire young women. Young women were not only, why women? Women were not only more kind of into that economic system, not expected to be quite as independent, but women were supposed to be subservient to whom? Men. So men could beat them to make them work. Hey, could you do that to children too? And they might be, if you're easy to break, they keep your entire life regimented. And there's another thing. You don't want people at work demanding freedoms. You don't want people there demanding crazy things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness when they work. You want them to obey because you have huge costs to make that if you're starting a factory, yes. Regimented means everything's very organized for them. And so they would keep them in dorms. They would have them all wake up together, all eat together, all go to work together, all eat lunch together, all go home together. They would try to have their exact nightly activities laid out because they don't want them staying up too late. Remember I told you people drank 10 times more alcohol back then? They don't want them showing up to work late or hungover or not at all. Control every part of their life. Do they want them dating? No! Get married, you're fired. Control every element of their life. That is the Lowell system. And look at the spindles. Can't you see why small hands might be nice? The thread is whirling in there. Stick a small hand to untangle a knot. By the way, what happens if the thread wraps around the finger? Gone. Gone. What happens? They're fired, and their pay is probably going to be docked because they got blood on their cloth. Hey, the idea, John? Yeah. Yeah, some kind of like workers' rights, or you ever heard of workers' comp? That wouldn't be to the New Deal. Under Franklin Roosevelt, workers didn't have those kind of rights. But the Lowell girls. So here is 75, catch that, from 15 to 35 years old, perfect age. And here's the table for the Lowell Mills, 1853, and they're all in these dorms. And the bell would ring at 4:30, telling everyone to get up. 2 bells, so you have 2 different shifts. 4:30, 5:30, 6:20, bell, bell, bell. All when you go, and you would go all to the bathroom together, all eat together, go to work together. This is all to maximize efficiency. all eat lunch, 2 different shifts, eating at the same time. You got 20 minutes each. That's when you go to the bathroom too. 6:30, that must be sundown at this time. They would alter it because of the sun. Go to work, and then they have every night all planned out. Get a little bit of break on Saturday on to 4:25. Why do you have bells? Nobody knew what time it was before the Industrial Revolution. Why did you care? You worked when you wanted to go home when you wanted to. You were relatively free. Not now. You got to be exactly where they tell you to be. That's the bells. Bell, I go to work. Bell, bell, bell. Remember I told you had to break people? It's hard to break adults, so what do? What have all of you done many times so far today? Why? What comes here in about 20 minutes?
Yeah.
A bell! Gee, I wonder why there are bells. That could be, I'm sure it's just a coincidence. What are you being taught to do? And not even realize you're being taught. Obey. Follow the bells. And it works, doesn't it? See anybody? It's an aberration if you see somebody walking down that hall, isn't it? Oh God, there's somebody out there. And you're all just waiting for the bell. So you can follow it. And you go. You go to the next class. And if you're late, what happens to you? You're punished. Right? You're punished. Like you three are going to be punished because you showed up late. Do I want excuses? No. All go together. In fact, aren't you being manipulated every second you're here? It's being, did you know you're being manipulated? You probably could figure it out. Like, why do they have all these rules? Some rules make sense, some don't. Have you noticed that? Why? So you get used to doing what? Obeying. I have rules you cannot believe. I have to follow them. What the heck am I doing this for? Why? Obey. It's not necessarily bad to manipulate people. But boy, is it bad if they don't know they're being manipulated and they don't know the reason. Then it's sinister. You should probably guess you're being manipulated. How many people knew you're being manipulated to be good little workers and in fact, in a cotton mill? What do you think the school system we have was designed? 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. Is there a better way to do it? Perhaps. It's not necessarily a bad way to do it, but they did it on purpose to teach you to follow the clock. So the next generation of young boys, they've been taught. Okay. They didn't resist as much. Become a cog in the machine. Aren't you sure good now?
That stressed me out so much.
Huh?
That stressed me out so much. I'm starting to question my entire life.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
But I'm telling you, it's not necessarily bad, but it is bad if you're not told. I do believe that. Have you ever been told that before? See, aren't you glad I told you? So what are we going to do? We're leaving. No. Now, obviously, there'll be problems. We didn't have that system. And I'm not saying it's bad, but you're brave people. You're broken. And think about it for a second. You do well in class, and what happens? You're rewarded. You do poorly, you're punished. You're being taught to obey. School is a great way to indoctrinate people. It's not necessarily bad, but it's no coincidence that the first labor unions will happen in Lowell. As these young women, we're talking anywhere from 10 to 25 or 30, are going to demand rights. Do we have freedom on the workplace? And you'll find out if you get a job. Your freedom is pretty limited. Especially if you're not in a union. I'll tell you that. I know about teaching, so I know how teachers are treated in states that don't have a union. See, if I didn't have a union, I couldn't have organized or made this line. That ant would be in trouble. Yeah, it does directly benefit me, so I'm a little biased there. But it was the whole thing. It wasn't so much about pay, it was rights. That's almost always what it is. Even though sometimes people transcribe to pay. That's a pretty sad picture, isn't it? It's always been presented as a mother and daughter working together. Especially at a time where there's a lot of states demanding to go back to child labor right now. Right now. That always pops up. Drops wages. So here's where the first big cotton mills, you see a little bit here, but they really spread. They spread throughout, but it's where there's water power. In the 1930s, the mills started moving down here because there weren't unions, so they could pay them less. And then in the 1980s and 1990s, the Walmart effect, they started moving to places like Guatemala and Honduras. When the worker there started demanding crazy wages like $1 or $2 a day, the production was moved to, you look at your clothes, where they made at? Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia. Where were you?
I was excused till right now.
I know, but where were you?
You guys being as
Oh. You were at Spring Meadow. Was it cold? Good.
Oh, it's terrible.
So now we need a new power source. Water power is limited. Coal and iron. Middle Atlantic. So we're talking here. There's a lot of coal, a lot of iron, and in fact, the first oil industry will be right here too. Right here too. Coal and iron, but we're coming to steam power. The coal would be used to heat the water. Then, of course, iron foundries. I mean, you combine iron and steam, and you have the first industrial revolution, which we'll come back to. But here are young men in hard rock mining. It's coal mining. And this is actually about 1890, but hard, shockingly dangerous work, especially to make it safer. It's a cost, and so they rarely would do that. These mules would be born down there and probably never come out. They die down. And here's an iron foundry, the Union Iron Mill. This is in Pittsburgh. These are breaker boys. Young boys are perfect for this. You may know what they're doing. It's a twofold job. The ones in the front are picking up rocks from the coal. A little bit further on, they crush. They stomp on the coals to try to break it into smaller pieces. And what happens if they fall in those chutes? Because it's like this, and the coal's moving fast. They're mangled, and what happens? Fire. Immediately. By the way, you're 12 years old, and that's your life. What are your options down the road? Pretty tough, isn't it? Not most children are not work. We'll talk about how children are going to change, but obviously, the poorer the family, the more that'll make a difference. The big thing is James Watt. Welshman, and Welshmen shall not yield. He would invent the first workable steam engine for power. Okay, there have been steam engines before. Heck, the Greeks had invented a steam engine, ancient, 100 BC, but they really didn't have any use for it except kind of like a toy. Watt would perfect an engine that was used to pump water out of mines and make it efficient. And basically what it is, superheat water, the water goes into this piston, and it pushes the piston up. The steam pushes it up. Then they release the steam, and what happens? Piston falls down. His big invention was not only make it more of a vacuum tube, but shoot a little jet of cold water into it. The cold water cools the steam faster, so it sucks it down. So it can move faster and more efficient. It doesn't lose power as it goes on. And brilliant design. So you turn this, you can turn a wheel, thus the wheel for a factory, or all kinds of wheels. This would be the power. This would be the power that would change the world. Steam. This would be it. Steam power. This would make Britain into the world power, the United States into a world power, and other places. The first industrial revolution, steam and iron. So here's a patent model for a steam engine. Here is, I don't even have a comment. That's a little car. It's on this little museum in Yorkshire. But it's a little car, a little steam engine. You can drive a little steam engine. The problem is these have a bad habit of blowing up. And can you imagine how red hot that would be? Not a very practical model, but I think you probably see where that's going. They've been using rails for a very long time to pull heavy carts with horses. Let's make a locomotive. And so steam would not only power these new factories, steam could be used for mass transportation and a whole industry to make steam. And so here's one of the first locomotives. This is that basic design here, but steam moves the piston turns the wheel, the power of a locomotive. And in fact, that's why the locomotives are shaped with that long cylinder. That's to hold the water. That means a train has to stop every about 15 miles to get more water. It has to stop every 30 miles to get more fuel. You ever know those little towns, like especially, you know it's in here, but like Eastern Montana too, but go to some place like little towns, like why is there a town there? What is the reason for Roundup? You know, you look at those kind of places, you know, why is there Terry, Montana? Circle? There shouldn't be Circle. Why? It was a coaling or watering station for trains. And you go to a place like Iowa, where there's a lot more trains, you really see little towns. You think, well, they must be little farming communities. Actually, the reason why the communities there and farms started was because the trains went there. So, trains change everything, but steam power. And with that, you now have the big steam engine. This is one of Watt's engine. This is a museum in England, but turning all of this. And now you don't have to worry about floods. You have to be stuck next to mountainside streams. You can move the factories either closer to the power, better places to build, and they can become bigger. This will change everything. All the things now that we have in the world are starting here. I'm going to jump right to, and this will breed innovation. Once you have a power source, once you have a need to operate steam engines and railroads and tracks and produce these goods and textiles, innovation breeds more innovation. No one's going to invent a light bulb until there's electricity. Innovation breeds innovation. So, for example, there's no way a sewing machine is going to make sense until you have a constant power source. It doesn't make sense. You turn it with a wheel, or you turn it with, you have the wheel turn, and that could turn a powerless sewing machine. 1840s, Elias Howe. Once you have trains, you need better communication. I mean, think about it for a second. Train coming, bridges out, train coming. Don't you need to warn the train, or at least somebody to put up a red flag saying don't go? What's that? The telegraph. Basically shooting either some kind of, usually a battery power, shoots a little bit of electricity down a steel cable. Now, steel cable bleeds away pretty fast, so it goes about 15 miles. So every 15 miles, you need a telegraph station. And somebody listening to, with earphones, basically just a little bit of static. 24 hours a day, just sitting like this. By the way, every 15 miles, what else is every 15 miles? A watering station for the trains, right along the tracks. But how do you communicate through little bits of static? What did Morse invent? That's where Morse code comes by. If you have a little bit of static, you divide it up into short blips of static, a dot, or a long blip of static, a dash. Has anyone ever tried to learn Morse code? Even a little bit. It's really hard, isn't it? Did you try it? Or can you do it much? I did a little bit. I know SOS. By the way, what does SOS mean? Nothing. Doesn't mean anything. But it's a good emergency thing. S for Morse code, dot, dot, dot. O, dash, dash, dash. How many words have SOS in the row? Almost none, so you can send that out as an emergency. That's why SOS came by. I would think save our ship, that's what I was told. No, just SOS. But there are people listening, they send it down the line. It's not instantaneous, but it's really fast. Did you ever play, okay, well actually we still call it telegraph, but like telephone, where you whisper something and send it down the line and what message you get over there. Yeah, so that would happen all the time, of course. But think about what this does. This is what we got to get down. This allows for bigger business. Before, if you ran a factory, you had to be there. So you're basically stuck. So how big can your factory be? One building. But this allows for bigger because you can actually centrally operate one factory from one location. So you can sit in the city like, let me throw a city out here. New York City, yet run iron mills across Pennsylvania, New York, into Scranton, let's say. Why Scranton? Coal and iron. It was an old iron town. And that's why. What's this invention? That's a cotton gin. We'll talk more about this later, but that would rip the seed, the hard seed, off the cotton fluff. Who needs cotton? For what? All those textile items. Gee, what's going to become more profitable? Slaves. The Industrial Revolution will mean slaves will become more valuable than ever before. Back in 1887 or 1787, when they wrote the Constitution, they really thought 20 years slavery would be done. That's partially wishful thinking. The Industrial Revolution, and wow. This did the work of 10 slaves, so we can get that much more out of 10 slaves. Next, let me give you a couple more innovations. Should add it. People today say, and it irritates me because it's something that sounds true, but it's not truthy. It's not really real. There's more innovation today than ever before. Yeah, there's little inventions that build on other inventions, which is fine, and people, brilliant people do it, and whatever. But nothing compares to this. This is innovation that literally changed everything. Nobody's making their own clothes anymore, and all those skills are gone. All of them. Even people that sew their clothing at home, they buy the cloth. It's all gone. It changes everything. So, here's ones for the farm. John Deere would invent not the tractor, there's no tractors yet. The steel tip plow. But that's what get his company going, and they would invest in they tried steam tractors too. They had these big tank-like tractors. But back the John Deere steam tractor is a very sad part of my family's life. My great uncle drove their steam tractor into a lake or into a creek, lost control, and that's how they became sharecroppers in Moscow Farm. That's one of the really sad stories of my dad's family. Okay. It was 1910. I wasn't around, but steel tip cut through the very thick soil of the plains. This would scour it off, so you ride here, pulled by horses. One person could plow significantly larger fields. Save labor, more production of food. Here's another one. This might be the biggest. Cyrus McCormick would invent the mechanical reaper. This would have been a great Halloween costume. To go to the mechanical reaper. Not the Grim Reaper. Okay, before with a scythe to cut down wheat, back-breaking work, and then you take the stalks of wheat and beat it against a rock, and the seeds will come on. What the British called the corn. The seeds, and that's the grain. Have you ate bread? That's what it comes from. What does this do? It does the work of 10 people. It cuts the grain right here. The stalks go into this, and it kind of flips around, and that will beat the corn down. Have you ever heard of a combine? Combines do this just at a bigger scale. And so this did the work of 10. By the end of the decade, or end of the century, 20 people. So farms don't need as many people. They can get bigger. Is this good for small farms? It might sound good, but how do you pay for this thing? Remember I told you all farmers are in debt? If you produce more food, what happens to the price of food? This mechanization would signal begin the end of small farmers, including my dad's side of the family. They became sharecroppers and lost the farm in 45, I think it was. So, why America? Why here? Why did it happen here? Why do we have this American system of industry, aka interchangeable parts? Why here? Why didn't it happen, at least right away, in other places around the world? There were a certain series of events, policies, luck that happened here. You see something similar in Britain. France didn't have these issues, even though they have very intelligent people. Interchangeable parts actually kind of began in France. The first thing is more demand here. The United States had the largest, they called it middling class then, but middle class. What's middle class? You have the tiny upper class. And those are people that basically do not need to work, at least the way we think of work, and could live, buy their mansion, build food, they have everything they need. And then you have the vast majority of people are working class. Almost all their money goes to food and survival. In the middle, now it's not direct middle, but in between them are people who have to work, but they can afford some of the trappings of an upper class life, meaning they can buy some additional things without going into a great amount of debt. In 1850, that would be like if you could afford to buy your own home. A big thing was if you could have a servant, which was therefore a working class person in your house. Maybe a big deal if you could afford some kind of barn, a horse, and a carriage. And that is, you have to work. There's more middle class people in the United States, and that meant more demand. More people to buy the goods of the Industrial Revolution. Here shows the richest 1% in France and Britain. In Britain, in 1900, 70% of the wealth was in 1%. France, about 60%. The United States, only about 47%, the richest 1% in 1900. But you notice, as the Industrial Revolution happened, wealth was focused more on top. But if 46% or 47% is in the richest 1%, that means everybody else, there's more wealth for them. Does that make sense? The more unequal the society, the less demand. And that puts great strain on the economy. So people who want to have that middle class life have to go into a great amount of debt if there's less money out there. For example, today, what's a middle class life? Would be things like going to college or sending your kids to college or some kind of school afterwards, maybe a house, having health care. Most people have to borrow a significant amount of money to buy a house or go to college, which you'll probably find out very soon. That's a little bit different. It's kind of interesting. Britain and France, the richest 1% because of government policy is way down here. U.S. went down, and now the U.S. is just skyrocketing. And that means less wealth in the hands of everybody else. That means less than. The U.S. had more. It's a big deal. But don't forget, we're now, this is about 2008. It's about here now. COVID, the wealth just, like a flow, like a waterfall. I guess that's the wrong way to do it. Waterfall up to the very wealthy. Well, Elon Musk wealth went up by, he just got $32 billion of wealth in a week. By the way, he didn't build anything. It's all stock value. It's all speculation. All speculation. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
How'd you do? No more excuses.
Good day with you.
See you tomorrow. Bye. All right, no more excuses. All right? I don't care what happens, just bash your way through. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
So where's she at?
she went to Hawaii.
She did. Oh my God, she went to Hawaii. Of course, she's been.
Right.
I had somebody else for a second. I thought 3 kids who went on vacation. She's been a lot, yeah. And she got to do her.
Yeah.
Where's is she? What island is she?
I'm not sure if she's there yet. She was all like,
Oh, so she's not even
yeah,
there.
she's not there.
No, you remind her. What do we My app, right, looking at that? There's nothing better than that. See,
Hello.
hello.
Just consistent.
Yeah, notes, and there's not gonna be a quiz today, because that's, people had to make up that test, and I don't wanna deal with makeup, so there's no quiz, unless you want a quiz, I can wing it. 20 questions, I can just give random questions.